Garmin Epix Gen 2 or the Apple Watch Ultra. Which one is the right one for you? What's the differences? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hello there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave from Chase the Summit, and in today's video we're going to be taking a deep dive in a comparison between the Garmin Epix Gen 2 and the brand new Apple Watch Ultra. Why do you ask? Well, because in the comments of my Apple Watch Ultra review that I posted a few days ago, if you haven't watched that one, I'll link it up here by the way, a lot of people are asking for a comparison video against the Epix Gen 2 because these two have a lot in common, including really great displays, and they're both marketed towards the same kind of outdoor adventure enthusiast person. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do today. And with that out of the way, without wasting any more time, let's dive into the first category, purchasing options and pricing. The Apple Watch Ultra only comes in one version, so it's pretty easy. This one version costs $800 here in the USA. That's going to vary wherever you are in the world. And there are a few different versions of it on Apple's website, because when you buy it, you get to choose what kind of band is included in the box. There are 3 different bands you can choose from, and each of those bands have 3 different colors. So there's 9 different versions of this watch in total, but at its core, it's all the same watch. The Garmin Epix Gen 2, on the other hand, is a little bit different. There's 2 models of the Epix Gen 2. There's the non-sapphire version that does not have a sapphire crystal on the display and it has less internal storage. And then there's the sapphire version, which has more internal storage and a sapphire crystal display, along with a nicer finishing on the outside of the watch. So the non-sapphire model of the Epix Gen 2 comes in at $899, and then the sapphire version comes in at $999, so about $1,000 here in the USA, and that's about $200 more than the Apple Watch Ultra. One perk of the Epix Gen 2 is you can choose the color of your watch, whereas on the Apple Watch Ultra you cannot, since there's only one version. This one version has a raw titanium case, which I think looks kind of cool, but your opinion may vary. On the Epix Gen 2, there's a few different options. You can get this black DLC coated sapphire model I have here. There's also a gray DLC coated sapphire model, and then on top of that, there's also the non-sapphire model that actually has a polished steel bezel, which kind of looks cool as well. When it comes to compatibility, the Apple Watch Ultra is only compatible with iOS devices. You're going to need an iPhone in order to even activate this thing to use it. The Garmin Epix Gen 2, on the other hand, is compatible with Apple iOS devices and Android devices. Both platforms have the Garmin Connect app to sync and pair and do all the things, so they're kind of equal. So if you're an Android user and you're trying to decide between these 2 devices, it's kind of a no-brainer. You got to go with the Garmin. In terms of size and weight, the Apple Watch Ultra comes in at 49 millimeters tall by 44 millimeters wide and about 14.5 millimeters thick, and it weighs about 61 grams without the band. The Epix Gen 2, on the other hand, is a 47 millimeter diameter because it's a circular watch and not square. So that means it's a little bit wider than the Apple Watch Ultra, but really in terms of the lug-to-lug distance on how tall they are, they're basically the same. The Epix Gen 2 is also 14.5 millimeters thick, so it's almost the exact same thickness as the Apple Watch Ultra, which is kind of hard to show on camera, and it comes in at 53 grams, so it's a little bit lighter than the Apple Watch Ultra. And for a quick size comparison, I've got some other watches on the table to compare to. We've got the Garmin Venue 2 Plus all the way on the left here, the Garmin Venue SQ2, the Garmin Instinct 2 Solar, there's the Apple Watch Ultra, of course, the Garmin Epix Gen 2, and finally the Garmin Tactix 7, which is a 51 millimeter case size and the biggest watch on the table. In terms of internal storage, the Apple Watch Ultra gets 32 gigabytes internally for all of your apps and emails and all your other things that you can do with Apple devices. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 also has 32 gigabytes, but only if you opt for the Sapphire model. The non-Sapphire model gets 16 gigabytes, or half the storage. Quick interruption, if you're finding this video fun or helpful or anything, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing down below, because that really helps me out. Also, if you're planning on picking up any watches I show off in this video, check out the links in the description down below, because those also help support my channel. Okay, back to the video. When it comes to the design and aesthetics between the Garmin Epix Gen 2 and the Apple Watch Ultra, they both have their own unique look. The Epix Gen 2 is more of a standard watch. It's got a round watch face, and it kind of comes off as being just a normal everyday watch, where the Apple Watch Ultra is definitely more noticeable. It's got that rectangle appearance, and the raw titanium enclosure case is kind of more noticeable on the wrist, and something if you walk into a room, people are probably going to notice it. But at the end of the day, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think both of these watches look great, so I don't really have an issue wearing either one, but you might. Both the Epix Gen 2 and Apple Watch Ultra are waterproof. You can go pool swimming and dive in the ocean and take a shower with them without an issue, and both are waterproof to 100 meters. However, Apple Watch Ultra does have one trick up its sleeve, and that it's actually certified for scuba diving, so you can go down to depths of I think 30 meters while using the Apple Watch Ultra, no problem. And there is a built-in depth app on the watch that you can use while you're diving. I'm not a diver, so I'm not going to share my opinions on that function. It is really cool. I've gone in the pool with it. It seems pretty accurate. Your mileage may vary, and it's pretty exciting because there's not a lot of smartwatches that are dive certified. When it comes to the displays on these watches, they're both very good. The Epix Gen 2 gets a 1.3-inch 416 by 416 resolution, 1000 nit bright AMOLED touch-enabled display. And this thing is a joy to use. It's very bright and vibrant. I can see it in direct sunlight. It's an awesome display. Even though the Epix Gen 2 has a great display, the Apple Watch Ultra really takes the cake here. It's got a 1.92-inch display that gets up to 2000 nits of brightness, and it's really the best wearable display I've ever tested on this channel. It's a joy to use. It is super bright, it's super vibrant, and the blacks are super punchy and crisp and contrasty. I can't say enough good things about this display. And because the Apple Watch has a square aspect ratio and a higher resolution display, it actually gets more screen real estate to do other stuff and makes it a little bit more usable for reading text messages, for example. Because both of these watches have super bright displays, they can actually both be used as flashlights. And as you can see here, I launched the flashlight app on both watches. The Apple Watch Ultra gets significantly brighter though, and that's because it uses the whole screen as a flashlight, as you can see here. While on the Epix Gen 2, when you trigger flashlight mode, it only uses a portion of the display because there's like striped circles in there, and that's all you get for illumination. I'm not really sure why Garmin does this. I think it's because they're afraid of burning in the display because it is AMOLED, but I wish you could turn the whole display white. That would just make it a lot more functional as a flashlight. Okay, now let's talk about the user interface between these two watches because they're pretty different. The Apple Watch Ultra is mainly a touch-enabled device. It doesn't have a whole lot of buttons on it, so when you interact with it, you're gonna have to swipe around the screen to get around the menus. And as you can see here, the app grid is just like every other Apple Watch. They're all kind of the same. There's a lot of functionality here, and it's really nice to just swipe around like an iPhone. On top of the touch-enabled display, though, you do have the digital crown on the side here, which has grown to be used with like gloves or sweaty hands. You've got the side button here, which is raised up from the chassis, so you can actually feel it without looking at it, which is a nice touch. On the other side of the Apple Watch Ultra, we have a new button called the Action button. It's this bright orange button that's kind of like a road cone here, and this button can be configured to do various things. I have mine set up to launch the workout app just by pressing it like this, and now I can go for my run right away. Another nice feature on the Apple Watch Ultra is called Precision Start, where you can actually start a workout using that new Action button instead of having to tap on the display to start your activity, which drives me nuts. So now you can see here I'm in my run. All I have to do is click this button like so, click, and my workout started. And to stop the workout, I just push these two buttons on this side, and now my workout's paused. But aside from those few actions I just did using the buttons, everything else is done with the touchscreen on the Apple Watch Ultra, which is good and bad. It's easy to navigate around because it's really responsive, but if it's raining, you're sweating, or you're swimming, you're underwater, or anything like that, the display is completely useless in those situations. Now let's take a look at the Garmin Epix Gen 2 and its user interface. So this has a mixture of both a touch-enabled display that you can swipe around your menus with, and it also has a 5-button system. So you have 3 buttons on the left and 2 buttons on the right. The nice thing about the Garmin interface is that you can completely disable the touchscreen if you don't want to use it and just use the button. You can do absolutely everything on this watch without touching the display at all and just using the buttons. And if you're just living your everyday life and want to use the touch-enabled display, you can turn it back on, which is a really nice feature. I will say the touch-enabled display on the Garmin Epix Gen 2 is definitely not on the same level as the Apple Watch Ultra. It's a little bit laggy. As you can see, it's a little bit choppy as I scroll. It doesn't move as fluid or smooth as the Apple Watch Ultra, and that's for a variety of reasons, but overall it's a very functional user interface, and I like the fact that I can disable the touchscreen if I don't need it or I don't want to use it. Okay, now let's open that big can of worms and talk about smartwatch features, the difference between the Apple Watch Ultra and the Epix Gen 2, because this is a pretty big divide. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 has pretty basic smartwatch features, so you can check your phone's notifications if you get a Facebook message or an Instagram mention or an email. that'll all pop up as a notification on your Garmin Epix Gen 2. The Epix Gen 2 has a great weather widget also that you can check your forecast for upcoming days and hours, and it's really detailed. There's also a really nice sunrise and sunset widget, and the Epix Gen 2 will integrate with your phone's calendar, whether that be your Apple Calendar or Google Calendar. And the Epix Gen 2 has internal storage for music that you can download from services like Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. Keep in mind, this is not compatible with Apple Music and some other services out there. It's only for very specific services. The watch face on the Epix Gen 2 can also be fully customized, so I can dive into my settings, go into watch face settings here, and I can scroll through a bunch of pre-installed watch faces, but I can also download third-party watch faces from the Garmin Connect IQ store. The Garmin Connect IQ store is kind of like Apple's App Store, just not as advanced, so you can download watch faces, data fields for your activities, and a few other things like apps and widgets, and install them on your watch, which is pretty cool. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 is also compatible with Garmin Pay, so you can pay for stuff using the watch by tapping it on certain credit card machines if your bank is compatible with it. Now, when it comes to the Apple Watch Ultra and its smartwatch features, the list is kind of endless. I'm not even going to be able to cover all the things this thing can do in this video. Basically, this is like having an iPhone strapped to your wrist. The Apple Watch Ultra also has full cellular support, so you can stream music right from your watch on Spotify or Apple Music. You can listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts. You can make and take phone calls right on your wrist by using the built-in speaker and microphone on the Apple Watch Ultra, and the speaker and microphone on this watch are really good. And again, you do have Apple Pay on the Apple Watch Ultra, so you can pay for stuff just like you can on the Garmin Epix Gen 2 by tapping it on certain credit card machines, which is super cool. And you can also hop on the iOS App Store and download literally 1,000 other apps to do a host of other things. Now let's talk about safety features between these two watches. On the Garmin Epix Gen 2, you've got crash detection for activities, so if you're running or hiking or riding a bike and you fall off and crash, the watch will identify that impact and try to call for help using your phone. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 is also compatible with Garmin's Live Track system, so you can actually share your location in real time when you're out on your trail run or hike. And the Epix Gen 2 does have Garmin Assistance that allows you to alert friends and family if you're in need of help discreetly from your wrist pretty easily. Keep in mind though that the Epix Gen 2 is not a cellular enabled watch, so you still need to have your phone on you in order for all of these functions to work. When it comes to the Apple Watch Ultra, it does have crash detection just like the Garmin, but the Apple Watch Ultra does have car crash detection, which is new on the Series 8 and Apple Watch Ultra. And because this is a cellular connected watch, it can do that even if you don't have your phone. You can also share your location to your friends and family using Find My on the Apple Watch Ultra, and it has a built-in siren. That's right, there's an emergency siren built into this watch that you can trigger from the emergency menu. At first, I thought the siren was kind of a gimmick, and when I tested it indoors, it was not that loud, but when I tested it outside, I was actually pretty surprised by how effective it was. When it comes to wellness tracking between these two watches, they both collect a ton of data. When it comes to the Apple Watch, it collects a ton of information like your all-day heart rate, your steps, your calories burned, your daily HRV, your body temperature while you're sleeping, and advanced sleep metrics with sleep stages like deep sleep, light sleep, and awake time. However, even though the watch collects a ton of data and syncs it over to Apple Health, it doesn't do a whole lot with that data. For example, if you had a bad night of sleep, maybe you don't want to run a marathon the next day, you wouldn't know because it doesn't provide any training feedback with the wellness data. The Garmin Epix Gen 2, on the other hand, does collect the same kind of metrics like your all-day heart rate, your step count, calories burned, stairs climbed, and so on and so forth. You also get additional metrics like your all-day stress tracking and a feature called Body Battery, which tries to turn your body into like a virtual battery. And on a graph, it'll show how your body battery is discharging throughout the day. There's also a new HRV status feature on the Epix Gen 2, which can track your HRV on a daily basis, and then compare that information to previous days. And if your HRV drops all of a sudden, it'll call that unbalanced. And in that situation, you might be overtrained, or you may have drank too much the night before, or you might be getting sick. I found the HRV status and body battery features on the Garmin Epix Gen 2 to be really valuable, and I really enjoy using them. And I wish I had something like that on the Apple Watch Ultra. And of course, the Epix Gen 2 does give you advanced sleep metrics like your sleep stages, your deep sleep and light sleep and awake time, and a sleep score that ties into all these other metrics to give you a holistic view of your wellness throughout the day. Now let's talk about training tools for a minute. The Apple Apple Watch Ultra has the activity app, which will display rings. And the idea is you want to close your rings for activity to know how active you were for the day. And if I scroll down here, there's even more information for how much I moved, how many calories I burned, my exercise time, my standing time, and you can get even more information like total steps, total distance traveled, how many stairs climbed. And at the bottom here, I've got any recent workouts. For instance, here's my 5-mile run from earlier today. You can also get your estimated VO2 max from the Apple Watch Ultra by diving into the health app on your phone. However, even though a lot of this data is collected, there's still not a lot of feedback on what to do with it, just like the wellness data. Now, if we take a look at the Garmin Epix Gen 2, it's a little bit different. You can see right front and center, there's a widget for estimated VO2 max and training status. If I dive into the VO2 max widget, you can see my current VO2 max, and if I scroll down, I can also see my race predictor. So this will tell me how fast I should be able to run certain distances from 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon. And the cool thing about this race predictor is at the bottom of the screen here, you can see a little graph that shows your improvement over time. Now, if we drop into the training status widget, you can see that it currently says maintaining, which indicates that I'm doing just enough to maintain my current fitness. Scrolling down, I also get my 7-day training load. And if I click the information button here, it'll actually tell me what's going on. It says my acute load is in the optimal range to maintain your current fitness. I've also got my 4-week load focus here, and you can see what zones I've been targeting for the past 4 weeks. Below that, I've got my recovery advisor that's telling me I need about 13 hours to recover from my last run. And at the bottom here, I've got my heat acclimation. If you are running in hot temperatures, this will tell you how acclimated you are to those hot temperatures. You can see mine is only 8% right now because it's pretty chilly outside. So yeah, I'm not going to dive through every little feature and nuance when it comes to training and wellness tools. Just know that you get a lot more information and feedback from the Garmin platform with Garmin Connect and all of their training tools and wellness tools as compared to the Apple Watch Ultra, which gives you some information, but it kind of leaves it up to you to decipher what it all means. Okay, now let's talk about activity tracking and activity profiles and how customizable they are. First, let's take a look at the Apple Watch. So on the Apple Watch Ultra, if you want to go for a run or a bike ride, you're going to dive into the workout app, which is the little green man there. You can see here, I've got a lot of options. I've got outdoor run, indoor run, outdoor walk. I'm not going to really read all of these, but there's a lot in here for just about every activity. And all of these activities are fully customizable. If I click these little 3 dots here, I can go in and click the pencil next to my open run here, and I can change my workout views, any information I see on the pages during my run. If I click edit views, I can scroll down and I can click what information I want to edit. When it comes to the Apple Watch Ultra, you get 2 pages of information, and each of those pages can have 6 data fields. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I scroll down, I get another page of 6. And then below that, I get more information like my heart rate zone graph. There's an elevation page. If you want to include that, you can toggle that on and off. There's a running power page, which we'll talk about in a minute. And there's an activity page, which will show you if you've completed your rings or not while you're out on your run. When it comes to the Garmin Epix Gen 2 and its activity profiles, there's a lot more to go through here. There's everything like your basic running and cycling and stuff, but there's also more niche activities like rock climbing, bouldering, stand-up paddle boarding, ultra marathon running, treadmill running, navigation, expedition mode. There's a bunch of activities on here that are not present on the Apple Watch Ultra. Another difference on the Epix Gen 2 is that you can have up to 8 data fields in an activity per page, and you can have more than 2 pages. Personally, myself, I like having 8 data fields because I've got things in here like my battery percentage of the watch, my current stamina, my average pace, my distance, and I can see that all at a glance on one page. However, the Apple Watch Ultra has a few more tricks up its sleeve when it comes to running, because in the Apple Watch OS 9 update, we got things like running power, vertical oscillation, ground contact time, all by just wearing the watch with no additional sensor required, where on the Garmin Epix Gen 2, if you want that information, you have to wear a chest strap like the Garmin HRM Pro to get that. Speaking of sensors, that's where the Garmin wins hands down. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 is Ant Plus and Bluetooth compatible, and there are a ton of accessories for this watch, like power meters and bike radars and cadence sensors, and a lot more, including heart rate sensors. The Apple Watch Ultra only supports Bluetooth sensors, and it's pretty limited on what sensors it will actually support. When it comes to mapping and navigation between the Epix Gen 2 and the Apple Watch Ultra, there's a huge divide here. So on the Apple Watch Ultra, Apple launched a new compass widget or app that you can open and use to navigate. So you can drop waypoints, you can drop pins to locations. Say you wanted to remember where your camp was, you can navigate back to that by dropping a waypoint and then viewing it on the Compass app, which is great. The Compass app also does have a form of backtrack, which will actively remember where you've walked while you get to your location, and then you'll be able to use the app to get back to the beginning of your activity. Even if you're walking your dog or just going for a casual stroll, the watch will automatically do this in the background, so if you need to get back to your car or something, you can do that in a pinch, which is great. However, the Epix Gen 2 takes this to a whole different level. There's something in here called topoactive maps, and what that is a full topographic map which has waypoints and points of interest and fully routable trails and roads, which means you can create custom courses on the fly right on your wrist. You can tell the watch you want to travel north, you want to run 5 miles, you can do this or that, and the watch will automatically create a course for you to follow. And all of this mapping and navigation is installed to the internal storage on the watch, so you don't need a cellular connection or a phone around in order to use it. You can use it anywhere, off-grid, all the time. Now let's talk about battery life, because that's a controversial one. The Apple Watch Ultra on paper is spec'd to have 36 hours of battery life in default settings. However, Apple is known to underestimate their watches in terms of battery life, and that's no different with the Ultra. So long story short, unless you're doing something crazy or using the always-on display, you can expect about 48 hours of battery life with the Apple Watch Ultra. Now when it comes to the Epix Gen 2 and the battery life on this thing, in smartwatch mode, you can get about 2 weeks of use with this watch. And that's with like daily minimal GPS usage. Like 10 to 14 days is pretty realistic. So a couple of weeks on a single charge as compared to a couple of days on a single charge. That's a big leap. However, if you do enable the always-on display on the Epix Gen 2, you're gonna get more like 4 to 6 days of use, because that always-on display takes a big hit in battery life. When it comes to GPS on battery life when you're out on a run or a ride, on the Apple Watch Ultra out-of-the-box settings, you're getting about 12 hours of use in a GPS activity. However, if you tweak some settings by turning on low power mode and disabling the always-on display and doing some other things but keeping GPS and heart rate active, you can get up to about 17 hours on the high end with the Apple Watch Ultra. 17 hours in a GPS activity is pretty good, but if we talk about the Garmin Epix Gen 2, you can get up to 42 hours with this watch in a GPS activity by using the GPS only mode, which is pretty impressive. In terms of GPS accuracy in modes when you're out on your hike or trail run like I am right now, both of these watches are very good. Both the Apple Watch Ultra and the Garmin Epix Gen 2 features something called multi-band GPS mode. Multi-band GPS mode allows these watches to connect or see more satellites in the sky at a given time by using multiple frequencies at the same time. However, in terms of accuracy, from what I've seen so far on both of these watches, I can say that they're two of the best on the market in terms of GPS accuracy. And the Apple Watch Ultra has another trick up its sleeve, because not only does it use the GPS data to determine your location, but it also uses Apple Maps data in an algorithm to kind of merge software and your actual location to get the best precise location on a map, which in practice really does increase accuracy, especially if you're on a road run where there's good map data. The Apple Maps data can make your track almost perfect. And finally, let's talk about the heart rate sensors on the back of these watches. Both of these watches have optical heart rate sensors, as you can see here, and they both have a pretty similar design. When it comes to the accuracy of these heart rate sensors, these are both really good. However, there's one thing to consider. These are heavier and larger watches. If you have smaller wrists and you're wearing a watch like this, you need to strap it down really tight to prevent it from bouncing around. Bounce equals bad heart rate data. So for me, I've got these medium-sized wrists. My wrists are about 165 millimeters circumference, and I find that I do need to tighten these down pretty tight in order to get pretty solid heart rate data, but when I do, they both perform pretty well. Now, even though I said both perform pretty well, I will give a slight edge to the Apple Watch Ultra. I feel like this is a little bit more forgiving. I can leave my strap a little bit looser, and it still provides really solid accuracy, where on the Garmin Epix Gen 2, if it wobbles around at all, it tends to leave some blips in my data, which I don't love. At the end of the day though, these new heart rate sensors on the Garmin Epix Gen 2 and the Apple Watch Ultra, they're both very good, and I really don't have any major complaints either one, even compared to ECG sensors that I'm wearing on my chest or armbands and things like that. They're all falling in line pretty closely and looking really good. And now that we've gone through all that, let's talk final thoughts. Which one's right for you? The Apple Watch Ultra or the Garmin Epix Gen 2? That is a really hard question to answer, because it's gonna boil down to your needs and what you're doing. If you're in the market for just a smartwatch that you want to wear on a day-to-day basis, take phone calls, send text messages, look at your emails, things like that, the Apple Watch Ultra is really the only option here because the Garmin Epix Gen 2 just doesn't do that stuff. The Apple Watch Ultra is a superior smartwatch in literally every way. It's got a really nice display, it's got cellular built in for making and taking phone calls, you can stream music from it, you can send texts, you can do all sorts of things with the Apple Watch Ultra that you cannot do on the Garmin Epix Gen 2. The Apple Watch Ultra is, in my opinion, the best smartwatch experience on the market right now, and I know that may be controversial, but I said it because it's really awesome. However, like I said in my Apple Watch Ultra review, being a great smartwatch doesn't really translate into being a great sports or outdoor enthusiast watch. They're very different. And that's where the Garmin Epix Gen 2 comes in, because Garmin has somewhat cornered the market, and the Garmin Epix provides a really amazing balance of having a really nice display, enough smartwatch features, and a ton of sport watch and outdoor enthusiast features. The Garmin Epix Gen 2 also provides way more training tools, wellness data, and feedback to let you know how your training's going, if you're doing too much, not doing enough, or you're just not doing anything at all. And on top of all that, you get way more activity profiles, more customization and sensor support, and of course, full-blown navigation and mapping built right into the internal storage of the watch. And on top of all that is the massive difference in battery life, with the Epix Gen 2 giving you a couple of weeks on a charge and the Apple Watch Ultra giving you a couple of days on a charge, which is just a huge divide. So which one is right for you? Like always, I have to say it depends. And I know you hate when I say that, but it really does depend. It all boils down to whether or not you need a smartwatch with the Apple Watch Ultra or a really capable sport watch with mapping and everything else on the Epix Gen 2 with a nice display. These are two very different tools for different jobs. Despite the marketing material around both of them being very similar, they're just totally different. And even though that I say the Apple Watch Ultra is more of a smartwatch than a sport watch, I do think there's a ton of potential here, and I do think Apple's going to continue to develop this thing. I'm very excited to see what they do with it. Oh boy, that was a lot to go through, and now I want to hear from you. Are you getting an Apple Watch Ultra or the Epix Gen 2 or something totally different? Let me know in the comments down below what feature is important to you and which one you went for. I think we did it. We made it to the end of the video, and if you're still watching, it means you probably liked it. And if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. Also, if you're planning on picking up an Apple Watch Ultra or the Garmin Epix Gen 2 or Fenix 7 or the Forerunner 955 or any watch I've shown off in this video, please consider checking out the links in the description down below, because they help my channel. They help support me, and I really appreciate it. Okay? Thanks. That is all I've got for this one. I'm actually losing my voice right now because I've been talking so much. I think I gotta go now. Yes, I do. I'll see you next time. Bye.